The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in their seats, watching the center platform with fear in their eyes. The air smelled of tension and old secrets. Ambassador Kethvoran stood near the back, his 4 hearts beating too fast. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His gray skin had grown pale over the centuries, and his 6 eyes had seen things that still gave him nightmares. But nothing scared him more than what was happening right now. On the center platform, a young warlord named Draxus Vorn was speaking. His red scales caught the light as he moved, and his sharp teeth flashed with every word. He was tall and strong, the ruler of the hegemony, an empire that controlled 900 worlds. He had never lost a battle. He had never known fear. And that, Kethvoran knew, made him the most dangerous being in the galaxy. For too long, Vorn declared, his voice echoing through the hall, we have lived under the shadow of an ancient law, a law that tells us to fear a single species on a single world, a law that was written by cowards who jumped at shadows. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked horrified. Kethvoran felt sick. The law Vorn spoke of was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. It was carved into black stone pillars that stood at the entrance of the council hall. The words were written in 17 languages, and they said the same thing in each one. Let no hand be raised against the humans of Sol. Let no fleet darken their skies. Let no word of conquest be spoken in their direction. This is the wisdom of the elders. This is the law that keeps the stars burning. Every child in the galaxy learned this law before they learned to count. Every captain memorized it before they were given a ship. Every emperor swore to uphold it before they took their throne. But Draxus Vorn had decided that the law was a lie. Look at the facts. Vorn continued, waving his clawed hand at a holographic display. A small blue planet appeared, spinning slowly in the air. This is Earth, the human homeworld. One planet, one species. They have spread to a few moons and nearby rocks, but they have never left their own system. They have, perhaps, 40 billion people. He paused for effect. My hegemony has 900 worlds, trillions of soldiers, weapons that can crack planets in half. And we are supposed to be afraid of them? An old creature near the front row stood up. She was a Velthari, one of the founding species of the council. Her body was like a twisted tree, and her voice sounded like wind through leaves. The law exists for a reason, warlord, she said. The elders who wrote it were not fools. They had seen things. They knew things. They knew fear. Vorn replied. Nothing more. They encountered something they could not understand, and instead of trying again, they ran away and told everyone else to run too. He shook his head. I am not a coward. I do not run from mysteries. I solve them. Kethvoran could not stay silent any longer. He pushed through the crowd and stepped onto the speaking floor. Warlord Vorn, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I must speak. Vorn looked at him with amusement. The ancient ambassador. Please, share your wisdom. Kethvoran took a deep breath. I am one of the few beings alive who remembers the time before the law. I was young then, barely 100 years old. But I remember the stories my elders told. Stories of what happened when our ancestors first found Earth. The hall went quiet. Even Vorn seemed interested. We were conquerors then. Kethvoran continued. We swept across the galaxy, taking what we wanted, crushing anyone who stood in our way. When we found the humans, we thought they would be easy prey. They had primitive technology. They fought among themselves. They seemed weak. He closed his eyes, remembering. We sent 30 warships to claim their world. Standard procedure for a pre-spaceflight species. We expected to have the planet under our control within a day. And what happened? Someone in the crowd asked. Nothing, Kethvoran said. The ships never reported back. They simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. Vorn laughed. So 30 ships were lost. That happens in war. Perhaps they flew into an asteroid field or suffered engine failures. We sent 100 more, Kethvoran said flatly. Same result. Then 1,000. Then 10,000. Ships with weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations. Fleets that had conquered half the galaxy. He paused. None of them returned. The hall was absolutely silent now. Finally, Kethvoran continued, one ship came back. Just one. Out of all those thousands, the crew had aged centuries in what should have been a journey of weeks. Their minds were broken. They spoke of impossible things. Time bending, space folding, their own weapons turning against them with perfect precision. He looked directly at Vorn, and they carried a message. A single message, broadcast in every language we knew, and many we did not. It said, "We noticed you. Do not make us pay attention again." Vorn was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "A fascinating story, Ambassador. But stories are not facts. Perhaps your ancestors made a mistake. Perhaps they encountered a natural phenomenon they could not explain. Perhaps they simply failed and invented a monster to excuse their failure. It was not a story," Keth Vorn said desperately. "It was a warning. The humans are not what they appear to be. Something protects them, something ancient and powerful beyond our understanding. Or," Vorn said, "they were lucky once, and your ancestors were too afraid to try again." He turned to address the full council. "I am not afraid. In 3 days, my fleet will depart for Earth. 60,000 warships, the largest armada ever assembled. And when I return with humanity's secrets, you will all see how foolish this law has been." He stepped down from the platform, his red scales gleaming with confidence. Keth Vorn watched him go, feeling cold despair settle into his heart. He had tried. He had warned him. But some beings could not be saved from their own pride. Around the hall, the ancient pillars stood silent, their warnings carved deep into the black stone. The law had been written in blood and terror 12,000 years ago, and in 3 days, Draxus Vorn would learn why. 12,000 years before Draxus Vorn was born, the galaxy belonged to the Founders. They called themselves that because they believed they were the first intelligent species to reach the stars. They were wrong, but they did not know that yet. All they knew was power. All they understood was conquest. The Founders were a coalition of 7 species who had met in the early days of space travel and decided to work together instead of fighting each other. This made them strong. Within 1,000 years, they had claimed half the galaxy. Within 2,000, they had conquered most of it. Their method was simple. When they found a new species, they sent a harvesting fleet. If the species was primitive, they took their planet and made them slaves. If the species was advanced, they took their technology and made them soldiers. If the species resisted too much, they simply destroyed them and moved on. It was efficient. It was brutal. And for 3,000 years, it worked perfectly. Commander Yorath was one of the greatest military leaders the Founders had ever produced. She was a Thesson, tall and powerful, with silver skin that could deflect small weapons fire. She had conquered 11 species personally. Her name was spoken with fear across 100 systems. When the scouts reported finding a new inhabited world, Yorath was given the mission. The reports said the planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. The inhabitants called themselves humans. They had primitive technology, barely capable of reaching their own moon. They fought among themselves constantly. They would be easy prey. Yorath took 30 dreadnoughts, more than enough for a simple harvesting mission. The journey took 2 weeks through hyperspace. When the fleet emerged above Earth, Yorath looked down at the blue and green planet with something like boredom. She had seen dozens of worlds like this, pretty, fragile, and helpless. "Scan for population centers," she ordered. "Prepare standard subjugation protocols." Her tactical officer worked the controls. Then he frowned. "Commander, I am getting strange readings." "What kind of readings?" "I am not sure. There seems to be some kind of energy field around the planet. Very faint. I cannot identify its source or purpose." Yorath felt a small flicker of interest. That was unusual. Pre-spaceflight species did not have planetary energy fields. "Is it a weapon?" she asked. "I do not think so. It is not directed at us. It seems to be watching us." "Watching us?" Before the officer could answer, every screen on the bridge went dark. Then they lit up again with a single image, a human face. It was an old human, with wrinkled skin and white hair, but its eyes were strange. They seemed to contain galaxies. "Hello," the human said. Its voice was calm and friendly, like someone greeting a neighbor. "We noticed your ships. Can we help you with something?" Yorath stared at the screen. This was impossible. No primitive species should be able to access her communications systems. Her ships had the most advanced security in the galaxy. "I am Commander Yorath of the Founder Coalition," she said, recovering her composure. "Your planet has been selected for harvesting. You will surrender immediately and accept our rule." The old human tilted its head, as if confused. "Harvesting? I am sorry. I do not think we can allow that. This is our home, you see. We have lived here for a very long time. We are quite attached to it." "You do not have a choice," Yorath said. "Surrender or be destroyed." The human smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind a parent gives a child who has said something foolish. "Commander, I think there has been a misunderstanding. We are not the ones who will be destroyed today." Yorath had heard enough. She turned to her weapons officer. "Fire warning shots. Destroy one of their coastal cities. Show them what happens to species that resist." The weapons officer pressed the controls. The great plasma cannons of the dreadnoughts powered up, glowing with deadly energy. Nothing happened. "Fire," Yorath commanded again. "I am trying, Commander. The weapons are not responding." Yorath looked at her screen. The weapons had fired. She could see the plasma bolts traveling through space toward the planet. But they were moving slowly, far too slowly, like insects caught in honey, and then they simply stopped, hanging motionless in the void. "What is happening?" she whispered. The old human on the screen shook its head sadly. "We tried to leave you alone, you know. We have watched your coalition expand across the galaxy. We saw what you did to the Vareth and the Kossians and the Mendel. We hoped you would learn. We hoped you would grow. But you just kept taking and destroying." The lights on the bridge flickered. Yorath felt a strange sensation, like something was looking at her. Not at her ship. At her. Inside her mind. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What are you?" "We are what your species might become. In a few 100 million years. We grew from humanity, and we returned to guide them, to protect them, to wait with them until the galaxy is ready." "Ready for what?" The human smiled again. This time, there was no sadness in it. "Ready to join us. But you are not ready, Commander Yorath. Your coalition is not ready. You still think power means the ability to destroy. You still think strength means the ability to take." The human's eyes seemed to burn with inner light. "We will teach you otherwise." Yorath never gave another order. Around her, her crew began to scream. Some aged centuries and seconds, their bodies crumbling to dust. Others simply vanished, transported to places she could not imagine. The ships themselves were pulled apart, atom by atom, not destroyed but disassembled, reorganized into something else entirely. Yorath herself was kept alive. She was forced to watch as her fleet dissolved around her. She was made to understand exactly what had been done, and why, and by whom. Then she was sent back to Founder Space, alone, in a ship held together by forces she could not comprehend. She was given a message to deliver. When she arrived home, she was no longer the proud commander she had been. She was a broken creature, aged beyond recognition, her mind filled with visions she could never escape. But she delivered the message, and the Founders wrote the law the very next day. The Hegemony fleet was beautiful in its deadliness. 60,000 warships hung in formation outside the Sol system, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint and polished weapons. They had traveled for 6 days through hyperspace, crossing half the galaxy to reach this small, unremarkable corner of space. Draxus Vorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and smiled at the view. His red scales seemed to glow with satisfaction. Behind him, his officers worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the greatest victory in Hegemony history. "Status report," Vorn commanded. "All ships report ready, Supreme Commander," his tactical officer replied. "Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. The fleet is in perfect formation." "And the humans?" The officer checked his scanners. "No response, Supreme Commander. No ships launched, no weapons activated, no communications directed at us." He paused. "They do not seem to have noticed we are here," Vorn laughed. "Or they are too frightened to respond. Either way, this will be easier than I thought." He turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast a message to the planet. Standard terms. Surrender immediately or face destruction." The message went out across all frequencies. For long minutes, there was no reply. "Perhaps their technology cannot receive our signals," the communications officer suggested. Or perhaps they are simply primitive fools who do not understand what is happening, Vorn said. No matter. We will teach them. He pointed at the blue planet hanging in the distance. Begin the bombardment. Target their largest population centers. Let them see what happens to species that ignore the hegemony. Supreme Commander, his first officer said carefully, should we not wait for a response? The old stories say. The old stories are lies told by cowards. Vorn interrupted. I did not travel across the galaxy to wait. Fire. The first officer hesitated for just a moment. Then he gave the order. Across the fleet, 60,000 ships powered their weapons. Plasma cannons glowed. Missile bays opened. Energy beams charged to their maximum output. It was enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. The first barrage launched. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked toward Earth, each one capable of wiping out a city. Missiles followed, their warheads armed and ready. Energy beams cut through space like burning swords. Then something strange happened. About 3,000 kilometers from the planet, every weapon simply stopped. Not exploded, not deflected, just stopped, hanging motionless in space, frozen like insects in amber. What is happening? Vorn demanded. I do not know, Supreme Commander. The weapons have stopped. They are not moving. They are just there. Vorn stared at the screen, watching his massive barrage float uselessly in the void. His confident smile slowly faded. Fire again. Another barrage launched. The same thing happened. The weapons flew toward the planet and then stopped, joining the first wave in a growing cloud of frozen destruction. This is impossible, Vorn whispered. His tactical officer began making strange sounds. When Vorn turned to look at him, the officer's face had gone pale with terror. Supreme Commander, look at your screen. Vorn looked. His display was changing. One by one, every ship in his fleet was being highlighted with detailed information. Not just their positions, but their exact specifications. Structural weaknesses in their hulls, power fluctuations in their reactors, the precise location of every crew member on board. Someone was analyzing his entire fleet in real time. And then a voice spoke. It came through every speaker on every ship in the fleet simultaneously. It was calm and measured, the voice of someone who had never needed to raise their tone to be heard. Warlord Draxus Vorn of the Hegemony, you were warned. Vorn tried to trace the signal. His officers worked frantically at their controls. Nothing worked. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Your ancestors were warned, the voice continued. The founders were warned. The law was written in 17 languages and carved into stone pillars that have stood for 12,000 years. And yet here you are. Vorn found his voice. Who are you? Show yourself. We are what humanity became, Warlord, and what they will become again. We are the architects of their protection and the gardeners of their future. We have watched your hegemony rise. We have seen your conquests. We have counted your crimes. The screens began showing images. Worlds the hegemony had burned. Species they had enslaved. Civilizations they had erased from existence. Every atrocity, every massacre, every act of cruelty, displayed in perfect detail. 900 worlds, the voice said. 200 species enslaved. 47 driven to extinction. 300 billion beings killed in your wars of expansion. A pause. We remember all of them, Warlord. Even if you do not. Vorn felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. Real, deep, paralyzing fear. What do you want? He managed to ask. We want nothing from you, Warlord. You have nothing we need. But you came to our garden with weapons and threats. And that requires a response. The ships began to shake. Not violently, but steadily, as if giant hands were taking hold of them. We do not kill, Warlord. Killing is what species like yours do. We teach, we show. We make sure that lessons are never forgotten. Please, Vorn said. The word felt strange in his mouth. He had never said it before. Please, whatever you are going to do, spare my crew. This was my decision. They were following orders. The voice was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something like surprise in its tone. That is unexpected, Warlord. Concern for others is not something your history would suggest. Perhaps there is something worth saving in you after all. The shaking stopped. Your crew will be returned to hegemony space, unharmed. with full memory of everything they witnessed today. They will tell your empire what happened here. They will make sure the lesson is learned. And me? Forn asked. You, warlord, will receive a more personal education. You have much to learn about the species you have destroyed. We will make sure you have plenty of time to learn it. The bridge lights flickered, and the real lesson began. The crew of the Eternal Conquest watched in silent horror as their universe came apart around them. First Officer Kareth had served Draxus Vorn for 15 years. He had seen worlds burn. He had watched civilizations fall. He thought he understood power and destruction. He understood nothing. The ships were not exploding. They were being unmade. Each vessel in the fleet was slowly separating into its component parts, but not like wreckage from battle damage. This was precise, deliberate. Every bolt, every wire, every atom was being carefully removed and repositioned. What is happening to us? One of the bridge officers whispered. Kareth had no answer. Through the viewport, he could see the ships nearest to them dissolving into clouds of metal and light. The clouds did not drift away. They gathered. They organized. They began to form something new. The architects are building something, Kareth realized. They are using our fleet as raw material. He was right. Over the next several hours, the crew watched as 60,000 warships transformed into something else entirely. The metal twisted and reformed. The energy systems merged and multiplied. Technology that had seemed advanced now looked like children's toys being reshaped by a master craftsman. When the process was complete, a vast structure hung in orbit around Earth. It was enormous, larger than any space station the galaxy had ever seen. It looked like a museum, with thousands of chambers and corridors, all visible through transparent walls. And inside those chambers, images began to play. They showed the history of the hegemony, not the glorious version taught in their schools, but the true history. Every war, every conquest, every species they had destroyed, the faces of the dead, billions upon billions of them, all preserved in perfect detail. Kareth saw the Verith, a peaceful species of artists who had been enslaved for their ability to create beautiful things. He saw the children of the Verith, taken from their parents and forced to work in hegemony factories until they died. He saw the Mendel, scientists who had been studying the mysteries of the universe when the hegemony arrived. They had tried to share their knowledge. They had offered peace and cooperation. The hegemony had taken their research, burned their libraries, and exterminated them for being too clever. He saw 100 other species, each with their own story of contact and conquest and death. Some had fought bravely. Others had surrendered peacefully. It had not mattered. The hegemony had destroyed them all the same. We did this, Kareth said quietly. We really did all of this. The voice of the architect spoke again, but softer now, almost gentle. Yes, you did. Your empire has brought great suffering to the galaxy, but you are not unique in this. Many species have walked the path of conquest. Many have believed that strength means the ability to destroy. What happens now? Kareth asked. Now, you go home. You return to your empire with the memory of everything you have seen today. You tell them about this museum. You tell them that their history is now visible to the entire galaxy. Every crime and cruelty on display for anyone who wishes to see. Kareth felt sick. The shame of his people's actions pressed down on him like a physical weight. What about the Supreme Commander? What about Vorn? There was a pause before the architects replied. Draxus Vorn chose to come here. He chose to ignore 12,000 years of warnings. He chose to bring weapons to a place of peace. He must receive a different lesson. Will you kill him? No, we do not kill. But there are fates that some might consider worse than death. Before Kareth could ask what that meant, he saw something appear in the center of the museum, where the flagship had been. It was a small bubble of space, perhaps 10 meters across, filled with soft light. Inside the bubble, Vorn was floating, but he was not alone. The bubble contained images too, thousands of them, cycling endlessly around the warlord. Kareth could see faces in those images, the faces of the dead, the victims of the hegemony, the species that Vorn had helped destroy. He will spend eternity with them, the architects explained. He will see each face. He will know each name. He will experience each life that was cut short by his empire's cruelty. It will take approximately 400 million years for him to meet them all. Then the cycle will begin again. Kareth stared at the bubble. Vorn was screaming, but no sound escaped. His mouth moved in endless terror as the faces surrounded him, pressing close, demanding to be seen and remembered. "This is cruel," Kareth said. "Is it? He destroyed 300 billion lives. We are simply introducing him to them." The voice carried no anger, only a deep sadness. Perhaps when he has met them all, he will understand what he did. Perhaps he will find some way to atone. We are patient. We can wait. Around the bubble, a message began to appear in light, written in every known language of the galaxy. Humanity remembers what others choose to forget. We have made remembering easier. Kareth understood then what the architects wanted. Not revenge, not punishment, education. They wanted the galaxy to see what conquest truly meant. They wanted every species to know the cost of empire. "Your ships are being prepared for the journey home," the architect said. "Smaller vessels, constructed from the remains of your fleet. Enough to carry your crew safely back to hegemony space. And then what? And then you have a choice. You can continue as you were, conquering and destroying. Or you can change. You can become something better. We will not force you either way. We only watch. We only remember." A pause. "But know this. We are always watching. And we never forget." The voice faded away. Kareth looked at the museum one last time, at the thousands of chambers filled with the hegemony's crimes, at the small bubble where Vorn would spend eternity learning the names of his victims. Then he turned to his crew. "Prepare to return home," he said quietly. "We have a story to tell." The Galactic Council had not seen a gathering like this in 10,000 years. Every species sent representatives. Every empire. Every federation. Every isolated world that had hidden from galactic politics for centuries. They all came to Thessar Prime, filling the Great Hall until there was no room left to stand. Ambassador Kethvoran watched them arrive with tired eyes. He had not slept since the survivors of Vorn's fleet returned with their story. He had spent days answering questions, confirming details, trying to help the galaxy understand what had happened. Most did not believe it at first. 60,000 warships transformed into a museum. A warlord trapped in eternal confrontation with his victims. Weapons frozen in space like sculptures. It sounded like mythology, not military history. Then the images arrived. The architects had made sure the museum was visible from anywhere in the galaxy. Anyone with a basic telescope could see it orbiting Earth, glowing with soft light, displaying the crimes of the hegemony for all to witness. The bubble containing Vorn was visible too. A tiny prison floating at the heart of what had once been his greatest fleet. Now no one doubted. The council speaker, an ancient being made of living crystal, called the assembly to order. Its voice rang through the hall like chimes in wind. "We are gathered to discuss the events at Sol. The destruction of the hegemony fleet. The creation of the structure now called the Memorial. And the confirmation of what many of us hoped was only legend. The existence of the beings known as the architects." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Fear and wonder mixed in equal measure. "We call upon Ambassador Kethvoran to share his knowledge. He is one of the few beings alive who remembers the time before the law was written." Kethvoran walked slowly to the speaking platform. His old joints ached, but his mind was clear. This was the moment he had dreaded and hoped for his entire long life. "Thank you, Speaker," he began. "I will tell you what I know, though I warn you, it is not a comfortable truth." He looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. Some were aggressive species who had built empires of their own. Some were peaceful species who had hidden from galactic politics to avoid being conquered. All of them were afraid. 12,000 years ago, my ancestors were conquerors. We believed we were the greatest power in the universe. When we found Earth, we thought the humans were just another primitive species to harvest. He paused, remembering the stories his elders had told him. We were wrong. The humans were not alone. Something lived with them, something that had grown from them, or returned to guide them, or had always been there waiting. The architects, they called themselves. They were human and not human, ancient and newly born. They existed outside time as we understand it. A delegate from a young species raised a limb. What are they? Gods? Perhaps. Or perhaps they are what all species can become, given enough time and wisdom. They told our ancestors that they had evolved from humanity, hundreds of millions of years in our future. They had learned to step outside time. They had returned to protect their origins, to guide their ancestors toward the same evolution. Why? Another delegate asked. Why would beings of such power care about the past? Kethvoran smiled sadly. Because they remember being small, being afraid, being threatened by empires that thought power meant destruction. They protect humanity now because humanity will one day become them. And they wait. Wait for what? For us. For all of us. Kethvoran gestured at the assembled species. The architects do not want to rule the galaxy. They do not want worship or tribute. They want us to grow, to evolve, to become worthy of joining them. Silence fell over the hall. The law was not written to protect humanity from us, Kethvoran continued. It was written to protect us from ourselves. The architects do not kill, but they teach, and their lessons are not gentle. Draxus Vorn will spend eternity learning the names of his victims. That is not cruelty. That is education on a scale we cannot imagine. The hegemony delegate, a young officer who had replaced Vorn's government after the disaster, stood up. What should we do? Our empire is built on conquest. Our history is written in blood. How do we change what we are? Kethvoran looked at her with something like hope. That is the right question, he said. And the answer is simple, though not easy. You begin. You start by acknowledging what you have done. You look at the memorial orbiting Earth and you accept that those crimes are yours. Then you make different choices. Better choices. He turned to address the full assembly. The architects gave us a gift today. Not punishment, though it may feel like that. They showed us what we have become. They held up a mirror and made us look. Now we have a choice. We can continue on the path of conquest, knowing that they are watching, knowing that they will remember. Or we can choose a different path. The ancient Velthari, who had spoken at the previous council meeting, rose from her seat. And if we choose the better path? What then? Then we grow. We evolve. We become worthy. Kethvoran looked toward the distant light of Sol, visible through the great windows of the council hall. The architects are patient. They have already waited hundreds of millions of years for humanity to grow into them. They can wait a few thousand more for the rest of us. The speaker chimed for attention. We must vote. The old law must be renewed and strengthened. But more than that, we must consider how this changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. The voting took hours, but when it was finished, the result was clear. The law would stand. More than that, new laws would be written. Laws against conquest. Laws protecting developing species. Laws that tried to move the galaxy toward something better. Kethvoran watched it all with quiet satisfaction. It was a beginning, just a beginning. The galaxy would not change overnight. There would be setbacks and failures and species who refused to learn. But for the first time in 12,000 years, he felt hope. Far away, orbiting a small blue planet, the memorial glowed softly in the darkness. Inside his bubble of light, Draxus Vorn continued to meet his victims, one by one, forever. And somewhere beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything the galaxy could imagine, the architects continued to watch, patient, waiting, remembering. One day, perhaps millions of years from now, the galaxy would be ready to join them. Until then, they would keep humanity safe, and they would never stop watching.